He believed she was merely another woman of color he could easily dominate, right until the moment she entered the courtroom and systematically dismantled his entire world. The asphalt ribbon of highway was a lonely stretch that evening, a void punctuated by the occasional passing car, its headlights dancing across the rain-slicked pavement. The street lamps sputtered, casting long, skeletal shadows across the road outside Sterling Creek. It was past 11, that quiet hour when the world yearns for the comfort of home. Commander Eva Novak had been navigating the dark for nearly 2 hours, her fingers tapping a silent, steady rhythm against the steering wheel, a soft jazz melody whispering from the speakers. She was dressed down, a simple gray pullover and dark jeans, her hair tied back, designed to blend in, or so she assumed. Then she saw them, the sudden, jarring bloom of red and blue lights in her rearview mirror, closing the distance with predatory speed. A knot tightened in her stomach, not from fear, she understood the script all too well, but from a profound sense of weariness. She signaled, smoothly guiding her car onto the gravel shoulder. Shifting into park, she took a deliberate breath, her hands resting in plain sight on the wheel. Her years in the service had taught her the precise choreography of such encounters. A stark white patrol car pulled up behind her, and the officer inside took his time, moving with the heavy, unhurried gait of a man who expected nothing less than total compliance. His boots scuffed against the asphalt, one hand casually resting on his belt, the other gripping a flashlight that sliced through the darkness as he neared. She watched his reflection in the side mirror, the name on his badge catching the light for a fleeting moment. Thorne, license and registration. The words were flat, devoid of courtesy, a well-rehearsed line delivered with a palpable edge of impatience. Ava met his gaze in the mirror before reaching with calculated slowness into the glove compartment to retrieve her documents. "Was I going too fast, officer?" she inquired, her voice a calm, unwavering counterpoint to his abrasive tone. Thorne didn't bother to answer immediately, taking the papers from her hand and examining her car with a sweeping, critical gaze. "Your taillight is out," he stated. Ava frowned, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "That's impossible." At last, Thorne's eyes met hers directly. "Are you questioning me?" A heavy silence descended, a palpable shift in the atmosphere where raw power collides with quiet resistance, and one side simply expects the other to yield. She'd felt it before, in tense briefings, on foreign bases, in grueling exercises designed to prepare soldiers for a world beyond the military structure. She knew pushing back was a gamble, but she also knew precisely where her rights began and his authority ended. "I'm simply stating," she replied, her voice remaining perfectly serene, "that my lights were inspected just a few weeks ago. But if one is out, I'll certainly have it repaired. Exit the vehicle." Thorne's voice cut through her explanation, as if she hadn't spoken at all. Ava let out a slow, controlled exhale, her eyes scanning the empty road ahead. No one to see. She tapped her fingers once on the steering wheel, then reached for the door handle. "Would you mind telling me why?" she asked. Thorne tilted his head, a smirk playing on his lips. "Because I'm the one who said so." She allowed his words to hang in the cool night air for a beat, before unbuckling her seatbelt and pushing the door open. The air was colder than she'd anticipated. She stepped onto the pavement, her posture a study in relaxed readiness. She wasn't seeking a confrontation, but she would not be cowed. Thorne stepped back, his eyes raking over her, taking her measure, calculating just how far he could push. "Turn around." Hands on the car. This time, her hesitation was more pronounced. For what reason? Thorne closed the small distance between them, his smirk vanishing. "Are you resisting arrest?" Ava stood her ground. "No, I'm asking for clarification." Something flickered across his face. Annoyance? Perhaps a touch of amusement. Then, without any warning, he reached for his radio. "I have a non-compliant female on the highway," he muttered into the device, then spoke louder. "I said, turn around." Her pulse quickened, but her expression remained a mask of neutrality. "Officer, I need you to hear me very clearly," she said, her voice low and firm, yet carrying an undeniable weight. "I am fully aware of my rights, and I am fully aware of the limits of your authority." Thorne's jaw tensed. He did not like that one bit. "You are under arrest," he snapped, his hand darting out to grab her wrist. Ava moved with fluid precision. stepping back just enough that his fingers grasped only air. Under arrest for what? Thorne produced a pair of handcuffs. For obstructing an officer. She exhaled sharply, a sound of frustrated recognition. So this was his play. Her military discipline took over, her heartbeat steadying, her breathing even. She saw two paths: comply now and dismantle this in court, or resist and risk becoming another tragic headline. She refused to be a statistic. With slow, deliberate movements, she turned and placed her hands on the roof of her car. The metal felt cold and indifferent against her palms. Thorne wasted no time, wrenching her arms behind her back, the cuffs biting into her wrists with unnecessary force before he shoved her toward his patrol car. "You have no idea what you're doing," she murmured. Thorne just chuckled, pushing her into the back seat. "Lady, I know exactly what I'm doing." But he didn't. He didn't have a clue. The hard plastic of the back seat pressed into her spine as Eva sat motionless, her wrists burning where the cuffs dug into her skin, her breathing calm and measured. The door slammed shut, a sound of finality trapping her inside. Outside, Thorne strutted back to his car, muttering into his radio. She looked at the partition separating them, her own faint reflection staring back, composed, resolute. But beneath the surface, a cold fire was beginning to burn. She had endured combat simulations, high-stakes missions, and hostile interrogations on foreign soil. This, however, was a different kind of battle, one waged against a man with a badge and a dangerous overabundance of power, a man convinced of his own invincibility. A few minutes stretched into 5, then 10. She shifted her hands, the tightness of the cuffs a constant, deliberate reminder of his malice. The driver's side door opened and Thorne slid inside, whistling a tuneless melody. "Well now," he murmured, pulling the seatbelt across his chest. "Let's you and I take a little ride." She offered no response. He threw the car into drive, the vehicle lurching back onto the highway, the emergency lights still painting the night in strobing shades of red and blue. The colors bled across the side mirrors, staining the road behind them. "You know," Thorne said after a moment of silence, "most people have the good sense to keep quiet when I give them an order." Eva exhaled sharply. "And most officers don't arrest citizens for asking a simple question." Thorne laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Lady, you really think you're something special, don't you?" She met his eyes in the rearview mirror. "I don't think." "I know." That gave him a moment's pause, his knuckles whitening as they gripped the steering wheel, a crack appearing in his smug facade. But he smoothed it over quickly. "You military?" he asked, his tone shifting. She remained silent. "Yeah, I thought so," he continued. "You've got that whole better-than-everyone attitude." He smirked. "Bet you thought that would make me back down, huh?" Still, she said nothing. Thorne clicked his tongue. "It's a shame," he mused, shaking his head. "If you had just done as you were told, none of this would be happening." Her jaw tightened at his audacity, at the way he twisted reality to make his abuse her fault. The station loomed ahead, a squat, gray building set back from the road. The parking lot was nearly deserted. The late-night machinery of justice moved slowly, and for now, she was its only focus. Thorne pulled into a reserved space near the main entrance, cut the engine, and turned to look at her through the partition. "I have to say," he murmured, "I do love it when they make it this easy." Before she could form a reply, he was out of the car, slamming the door. A moment later, her door was pulled open. "Let's move," he commanded. Eva twisted her wrists as she stepped out, the steel cuffs grinding against her skin. He hadn't loosened them. She held her head high as he led her inside, past a bored-looking desk sergeant and into the processing area. The room smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. A metal bench ran along one wall next to a heavy steel door that led to the cells. Thorne removed her cuffs only long enough to shove her through the booking process, fingerprints, a mugshot, the dehumanizing routine. The officers behind the desk barely acknowledged her existence, their movements mechanical and indifferent. It was the kind of apathy that allowed men like Thorne to flourish. When it was done, he gripped her arm again, steering her toward the holding cells. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he muttered, his voice low. She glanced at him. "I don't have to think." His grip tightened, a clear sign her words had found their mark. "Enjoy your stay," Thorne sneered, pushing her toward an open cell. Eva caught her balance just before stumbling. She turned, her gaze steady, as the heavy metal bars slid shut between them. Thorne smirked from the other side, tapping the bars once with his fingers before turning and walking away. The lock clicked, a sound of absolute finality. She took a slow, deep breath and sat on the bench, the chill of the metal seeping through her jeans, grounding her. One night, that's all this would take. Because Officer Thorne had absolutely no idea who he had just declared war on. The metal bench was a cold, unforgiving slab. Eva shifted, rolling her shoulders to ward off the encroaching stiffness. The cell was stark. 4 walls, a single flickering bulb overhead, and the lingering scent of sweat and disinfectant. She had endured far worse in places where the only comfort was survival. This was a minor inconvenience, but that didn't lessen the anger simmering within her. Through the bars, she could hear the low hum of conversation from the front desk, the rustle of papers, the clink of a mug. She exhaled slowly, rhythmically. Control the breath, control the mind. It was a mantra drilled into her since her earliest days of training. Then she heard them, heavy, confident footsteps. Thorne. She recognized the arrogant cadence of his walk before he even rounded the corner. He appeared a moment later, arms folded across his chest, the same condescending smirk plastered on his face. Getting comfortable? She didn't grant him a reply. He tilted his head, stepping closer to the bars. You know, if you'd just played the part, you wouldn't be sitting in here. A slow smile curled the edges of her lips. Oh, I'm exactly where I need to be. Thorne's smirk wavered just for an instant. A flicker of something, annoyance, confusion, danced in his eyes before he masked it with a scoff. "No one's coming for you tonight, lady," he said, glancing around the empty area. "Guess you'll have plenty of time to reconsider that attitude of yours." Eva simply watched him, her silence a weapon he didn't know how to counter. Thorne leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "See, the thing about people like you is that you think you're above the rules. You think a little bit of confidence is a get-out-of-jail-free card." She let him talk, let him spin his narrative. It was all meaningless noise, the last gasps of a man who didn't realize the ground was crumbling beneath his feet. And then, as if summoned by fate, another officer approached, a younger man holding a clipboard. Sergeant," the officer began, his voice laced with uncertainty. "We just got a call." Thorne barely glanced at him. "And?" The officer hesitated, shifting his weight. I think you need to take this." Thorne frowned, shooting Eva one last glare before stepping away. She leaned back, listening intently. The conversation was hushed, but she caught fragments, words like attorney, a call from a superior officer, to questions about the grounds for her detention. Thorne's voice grew lower, sharper, laced with irritation. The younger officer stammered a reply, but whatever he said only seemed to deepen Thorne's anger. Then the heavy footsteps returned, faster this time. Thorne stormed back into view, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists. The smirk was gone, replaced by a mask of raw fury. "What the hell did you do?" Eva leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "I didn't do anything," she said, tilting her head. But word travels fast, and some of us have connections in very high places. The color drained from Thorne's face. She could see it then, the dawning realization, the seismic shift of power. He was no longer the one in control. He spun on his heel, muttering a curse under his breath as he disappeared down the hall. Eva exhaled. It wouldn't be long now. And when the full truth came to light, Thorne was going to regret every single choice that had led him to this moment. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the courthouse, painting long, bright stripes across the polished marble floors. The air inside was still and cold, a formal chill that settled into your bones. Ava Novak stood beside the defendant's table, her posture poised, her eyes missing nothing. She wore no handcuffs, no jumpsuit, only a perfectly tailored navy blue blazer and an aura of unshakable command. At her side, her attorney, Alani Reyes, methodically reviewed a sheaf of documents, a woman of sharp efficiency and few words. Ava appreciated that. The heavy courtroom doors swung open, and Officer Thorne strode in, still carrying himself with an air of ownership. But something was different. A new stiffness, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes that hadn't been there the night before. He caught Eva's gaze and quickly looked away. Good. The judge entered, and a hush fell over the room. Judge Marcus Thorncroft, a man whose weary eyes had seen it all, adjusted his spectacles, and got straight to the point. The prosecutor, a man with meticulously combed hair, rose. "Your Honor, we have reason to believe that the defendant, Commander Eva Novak, was detained unlawfully and without probable cause. Furthermore, information has come to light that suggests a pattern of disturbing conduct by the arresting officer, Sergeant Kalen Thorne." A murmur spread through the courtroom. Thorne shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The judge peered at him over his glasses. "Sergeant Thorne, would you care to respond?" Thorne leaned into the microphone. "Your Honor, the defendant was uncooperative during a standard traffic stop." The prosecutor interjected smoothly. "Uncooperative?" He lifted a document. "Commander Novak's file indicates an exemplary military career. A graduate of the Naval Academy with multiple commendations, no criminal record, and not so much as a single parking ticket. Are you suggesting this individual posed such a risk that an arrest for a broken taillight was warranted?" Thorne opened his mouth, but no words came out. The silence was damning. The prosecutor pressed on. "Additionally, an internal audit reveals a statistically significant pattern of traffic stops initiated by you, Sergeant, involving drivers of color in this district." The murmurs grew louder. Thorne's face was turning a deep shade of red. Judge Thorncroft sighed. "Sergeant, I am deeply troubled by what I am hearing." Thorne crossed his arms, defiant. She resisted. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "The body camera footage suggests otherwise." Another wave of whispers swept the room. Thorne looked desperately toward the judge. "I was following procedure." Judge Thorncroft was unmoved. "Let's see the footage." A screen descended and the video played. Ava didn't need to watch. She had lived it. Thorne's belligerent commands, her own measured voice, his needless escalation, the smug satisfaction as he tightened the cuffs. When the footage ended, the courtroom was utterly silent. The judge leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "Sergeant Thorne, you violated department protocol, you executed an unlawful arrest, and you falsified your initial report." Thorne started to speak, but the judge cut him off. "The charges against Commander Novak are hereby dismissed." His gavel struck the wood with a sharp final crack. "And I am ordering an immediate internal investigation into the conduct of Sergeant Thorne." The tension in the room snapped. Thorne looked as if he'd been physically struck, his face flushed, his hands balled into fists. Ava let out a slow, quiet breath. She had never doubted the outcome. As she gathered her things, her eyes met Thorne's one last time. No words were needed. He had tried to break her, to assert his power, but in the end, it was his own reputation that lay shattered on the courtroom floor. Thorne stormed from the courtroom, his footsteps echoing in the marbled hall. He could feel their stares, fellow officers, court clerks, even the reporters who had caught wind of the story. He was accustomed to being in control, to commanding a room through respect or fear. Now that power was dissolving like sand through his fingers. And then the final blow. Sergeant Thorne. The sharp voice belonged to Chief Wallace Sterling, who stood with his arms crossed, his expression a stone mask. A 30-year veteran, his word was law in the department. Thorne stopped. "Sir?" The chief motioned him into a private office. The moment the door clicked shut, the chief's voice dropped to a low, dangerous tone. "What in God's name were you thinking?" Thorne's anger flared. "I was doing my job. Your job?" The chief scoffed, throwing a thick file onto his desk. It landed with a heavy, accusatory thud. "Your job is not to harass decorated naval officers. The body cam, the arrest history, the fact you didn't even run her plates properly. You were completely out of line. What does her rank have to do with it?" "Everything." The chief's voice was like ice. "You didn't just pull over some random person. You created an interagency incident. Do you think for 1 second this is just going to blow over?" Thorne looked away, grinding his teeth. She was disrespectful. "She questioned your authority," the chief cut in. "That is not a criminal offense, Thorne." Thorne scoffed. "You don't understand people like that." "People like what?" The chief's expression hardened into granite. Thorne's silence was his answer. Sterling sighed, rubbing his forehead. "The district attorney is currently reviewing every single arrest you have made in the last 5 years. You have been flagged for a pattern of racial profiling, and I promise you, this department will not go down to protect you." Thorne felt the floor drop out from under him. "What does that mean?" "It means you are on immediate, indefinite suspension." He let the words sink in. "Internal Affairs is launching a full investigation. And when they find what I know they are going to find, your career in law enforcement is over." The words struck Thorne with the force of a physical blow. "This is ridiculous." "Don't." The chief held up a hand. "Just don't. Clear out your locker. And if I were you, I'd hire a very good lawyer." Thorne stood frozen, his world collapsing around him. And for the very first time, he understood that he was not, and had never been, untouchable. Miles away, Eva sat in a quiet cafe, stirring her coffee and scrolling through the news on her phone. The story was already exploding. Decorated commander unlawfully arrested. Officer under investigation for misconduct. The viral footage was everywhere. She wasn't surprised. She knew from the moment he had pulled her over how this would end. She had encountered men like Thorne before, arrogant, entitled, convinced the rules were for other people. But this time he had picked the wrong fight. Her phone buzzed. A message from Alani Reyes. Thorne suspended. "Criminal charges may follow." Eva took a slow, satisfying sip of her coffee. Good. She looked out the window, watching the city pulse with life. The battle wasn't over. Not for her, and certainly not for the countless others Thorne had likely wronged. But today this moment was a victory. The crisp afternoon air smelled of rain as Eva left the cafe, the weight of the last day not a burden, but a testament to her resolve. She walked with her head held high, her steps even and sure. Her phone buzzed again. A familiar number. She answered. "Commander!" The captain's voice was calm. "I trust you've seen the news." "I have." A short pause. "How are you holding up?" Eva caught her reflection in a shop window. She saw no trace of fear, no hint of defeat. "I feel," she replied, "like I did exactly what needed to be done." "I thought you might say that." His voice softened. "The Department of Defense is taking a keen interest in this situation. Don't be surprised if they ask you for a statement." Eva sighed. "I'm not really interested in becoming a headline." "You already are," the captain countered. "And like it or not, what happened to you shines a light on a much bigger problem." She knew he was right. Thorne wasn't just one bad officer. He was a symptom of a sick system. A system that had protected men like him for far too long. This was never just about her. It was about every person who had been in her position, but lacked the rank, the resources, or the voice to fight back. "This isn't the first time this has happened," she said, her voice quiet. "And it won't be the last." "No," the captain agreed. "But it's the first time Thorne will face any real consequences for his actions. And that is because you did not back down." Eva closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. She hadn't backed down. Not when he tried to intimidate her, not when the cuffs bit into her wrists, not even as she sat in that cold cell, knowing the system was designed to crush her. She had held her ground, and she had won. "One more thing," the captain added. "You can expect a call from the mayor's office." Eva raised an eyebrow. "Oh? It seems they want to publicly recognize you for your professionalism and grace under pressure." A small, ironic smirk touched her lips. "You going to accept?" "I'll think about it," she said, ending the call. Across the street, a young mother walked with her son, his small hand in hers, his laughter bright and carefree. Eva watched them, a profound sense of purpose settling over her. She had fought for herself, yes, but she had also fought for him. For every child who deserved to live in a world where a badge was a symbol of protection, not a weapon of oppression. She took a deep breath, and then she walked on, her steps firm, her mission clear. This fight was not just hers. It never had been. Power without accountability is tyranny, and the only way to heal a broken system is to force it to confront its own reflection. What was done to Eva is done to people every single day, people who do not have the shield of rank or the certainty of evidence. That is why every voice matters. That is why silence is not an option. If this story made you feel something, share it. If it made you angry, speak about it. And if it made you understand how much work remains, then stay in the fight. Because true change begins when we refuse to look away.